The new neighbor. The barrio of San Miguel was the kind of place where nothing remained a secret for long. Tucked tightly between the rugged coastline and the dense, humid jungles of the Visayas, everyone knew everyone. They knew whose rooster crowed the earliest, whose child was skipping school to swim in the river, and whose cooking smelled the best when the sun began to dip behind the mountains. So, when Elena arrived, the entire barrio took notice. She moved into a small, weathered nipa hut at the very edge of the village, right where the gravel road dissolved into the tall, wild kogan grass of the jungle. She was beautiful, but it was a quiet, haunting kind of beauty. Her skin was smooth, her long black hair fell like silk past her waist, and her eyes carried a deep, unfathomable stillness. She was polite, but she kept her distance. When she walked to the morning market, she kept her head down, her shoulders wrapped tightly in a faded shawl. She works the night shift at a textile factory in the next town. Old Mang Thomas would tell the men gathering at the sari-sari store, taking a sip of his local tuba wine. That's why she sleeps all day. Nothing strange about a woman earning an honest living, but others weren't so sure. Aling Marta, who lived just a quarter-mile down the road from Elena, noticed things. She noticed that Elena never bought meat at the market, only root crops and fruits. She noticed that Elena's house had no mirrors, and most peculiar of all, she noticed that no matter how stiflingly hot the tropical afternoons became, Elena never seemed to sweat. She remained perfectly, unnaturally cool. The whispers in the dark. As the weeks bled into months, a heavy, suffocating unease began to settle over San Miguel. It started with the animals. One morning, a farmer found his prize water buffalo dead in the pasture. The animal hadn't been eaten by wild dogs or slaughtered by thieves. It was completely intact, save for a single, deep, precise puncture wound near its neck. The most terrifying part? The massive beast had been drained completely dry of blood, its hide pale and leathery under the morning sun. Within a week, the village dogs stopped barking at night. Instead, as soon as the clock struck midnight, they would whine, tuck their tails between their legs, and claw desperately at the doors to be let inside. Then came the sounds on the roofs. It started at Aling Marta's house. Her daughter-in-law, Maria, was 7 months pregnant with her first child. One Tuesday night, while the rain gently patted against the banana leaves outside, Maria woke up to a strange noise directly above her bedroom. Scratch, scratch, scritch. It sounded like the claws of a massive bird scraping against the corrugated iron roof. Maria froze, her hand instinctively flying to her swollen belly. She held her breath, listening. Then she heard it, a sound that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was a faint, rhythmic beating of wings, but it didn't sound like a bird. It sounded heavy, leathery and wet, like the wings of a bat, but magnified 100 times. From the ceiling above, a tiny, almost imperceptible scratching sound began. Maria looked up in the dim light of the gas lamp. A small splinter of wood from the woven bamboo ceiling drifted down, landing on her blanket. Above it, something was trying to find a way in. Suddenly, a furious barking erupted from the village center, followed by the loud bang of a neighbor's shotgun firing into the dark. Whatever was on the roof vanished instantly, leaving behind only the sound of rushing air and a lingering smell in the breeze. I smell like copper, old coins, and rotting meat. The discovery. The village chief ordered night patrols. The men of San Miguel armed themselves with machetes, flashlights, and bamboo spears, roaming the dark dirt roads in groups of 4. Among them was Thomas's son, a sharp-eyed young man named Jun. On a Friday night, the moon was swallowed whole by thick black storm clouds. The air was thick and heavy with moisture. Jun and his patrol partner were walking the perimeter near the edge of the jungle, right past Elena's isolated nipa hut. "Look," Jun whispered, pulling his partner into the shadow of a wild mango tree. He pointed at Elena's house. The hut was completely dark, but the small wooden window at the back was propped wide open. That was strange. Nobody in the barrio left their windows open at night anymore, not with the terror in the air. Suddenly, a low guttural groan echoed from inside the dark hut. It didn't sound human. It sounded like a body tearing itself apart, bone snapping against bone, muscle stretching to its absolute limit. Jun's heart hammered against his ribs, ignoring his partner's terrified whispers to turn back. Jun crept closer to the open window. He pressed his back against the rough bamboo wall of the hut and peeked inside. The room was illuminated only by the faint, eerie glow of fireflies outside. In the center of the room stood Elena, but she was not whole. Jun gasped, clamping his hand over his mouth to muffle the sound. Elena's body was violently convulsing. Her eyes had rolled back completely, leaving only terrifying circles of white. From her shoulder blades, two massive, dark, leathery wings, fleshy and veined like a bat's, were tearing through her skin, unfolding into the cramped room. And then the horror deepened. With a wet, sickening tear, her body began to separate at the waist. Jun watched in absolute paralyzed terror as Elena's upper torso, complete with her head, arms, and those monstrous wings, lifted off the ground. Thick, dark organs dangled from her severed midsection, glistening in the dark. The upper half of her body hovered in the air for a moment, smelling heavily of iron and ash. With a powerful, silent beat of her massive wings, the half-woman glided out of the open window, soaring straight up into the black storm clouds, leaving behind a chilling, high-pitched whistle that echoed over the jungle, the ritual of the earth. Jun collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His partner had already fled back to the village center in terror. But Jun knew that if he ran now, someone else in the village would die tonight. He had to stop it. He remembered the old stories his grandmother used to whisper by the fire, the ancient lore of the Visayas. He knew what he had to do. Jun climbed through the open window and stepped into the dark hut. The smell inside was overpowering, a mixture of sulfur and stagnant swamp water. He shone his flashlight around the small room until the beam landed on the far corner, hidden behind a woven screen. There it was. Standing perfectly upright in the corner was the lower half of Elena's body. From the hips down, her legs stood motionless, clad in her faded skirt. The flesh at the waist was raw, open, and pulsing faintly with a horrific residual life. It was waiting for its other half to return. Jun reached into his deep pockets. Before setting out on patrol, his father had insisted he carry a pouch of rock salt and crushed garlic, old superstitions he had thought at the time. Now, they were his only weapon. With trembling hands, Jun opened the pouch. He stepped up to the stationary lower torso. His stomach turned, but he forced himself to lean forward. He took a heavy handful of the coarse rock salt, mixed with pungent crushed garlic cloves, and poured it directly onto the exposed, open flesh of the waist. The moment the salt touched the raw muscle, the legs violently twitched. A low, hissing sound, like water hitting hot coals, echoed through the quiet hut. The flesh began to blister and blacken, rejecting the air around it. Jun didn't stop. He poured the entire bag, ensuring every inch of the open wound was coated in the burning, purifying mixture. Then he climbed back out the window and hid in the thick kogon grass, waiting. The coming of the dawn. The hours dragged like centuries. The storm clouds finally broke, pouring a torrential rain over San Miguel, washing away the tracks, but doing nothing to ease the tension in Jun's chest. At around 4 in the morning, the rain stopped. The first, incredibly faint gray light of dawn began to bleed over the horizon, painting the edges of the sky in deep shades of purple and bruised blue. Then came the sound, a frantic, heavy flapping of wings. Jun looked up. High above, a dark shape was descending from the sky. Elena's upper torso was returning, flying erratically, her wings beating clumsily as if she was losing her strength. The approach of daylight was weakening her. She crashed through the open window of the hut, desperate to be whole before the first ray of sunlight touched the earth. From his hiding place in the grass, Jun listened. A blood-curdling, agonizing shriek tore through the morning quiet. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated torment. Inside the hut, Elena was trying to reattach herself. But the salt and garlic had done their work. The flesh of her lower half was completely cauterized, blackened, and dead. The top half could not fuse with the bottom. She slammed her torso down again and again, screaming as the salt burned her internal organs. But the gap remained wide open. Realizing she was trapped, the creature dragged herself to the window, using her long, clawed fingers to pull her upper body out onto the muddy ground. Her beautiful face was gone, replaced by a contorted mask of fury and desperation. Her fangs were bared, and her white eyes searched the horizon. Just then, the sun broke over the mountain peaks. A single golden beam of morning sunlight pierced through the trees and struck Elena directly across her chest. The creature let out one final, deafening howl that shook the leaves from the trees. Where the sunlight touched her, her flesh didn't just burn, it dissolved. Like dry paper thrown into a roaring fire, her wings, her torso, and her beautiful face began to crumble into thick, black ash. Within seconds, the wind from the sea picked up, blowing through the tall kogon grass. It caught the ash, scattering it into the jungle and out over the open water until nothing was left. When the villagers arrived at the hut later that morning, led by June, they found the nipa house completely empty, save for a pair of hollow, lifeless legs standing in the corner, which crumbled into dust the moment the village chief touched them. San Miguel returned to its quiet rhythm. The dogs stopped crying at midnight, and the pregnant mothers slept peacefully through the night. But if you visit the coastal villages of the Visayas today, you will notice that the elders still tell the young men never to wander near the jungle edge alone at night. And if you look closely at the houses, even the modern ones, you will often find a small bowl of rock salt and garlic sitting quietly on the windowsills, just in case the shadows in the sky decide to return